So this weekend saw both the release of Assassin's Creed Shadows and the Snow White movie, and they are both getting smoked. And I think this is an absolutely fascinating development in the battle for pop culture. Now, these types of games getting absolutely crushed by social media and their lack of sales isn't really anything new. We've been seeing that kind of a lot. It's been a trend, really, for the past year, which is pretty interesting. And there's been plenty of, woke movie bombs that have gotten absolutely slaughtered. But what I find really interesting about this particular launch of these two titles is the sort of unanimity and the complete rejection of them across the board. I mean, of course, you're always going to have outliers that are defending it. There's always the little activists who've got their little flags and their marching orders, and, they've lined up to defend these things, and they don't matter. Their temperature means absolutely nothing. They're going to do that no matter what happens, so they're irrelevant. What is relevant is the grander audience of these two things. And even more interesting is I don't think there's a whole lot of overlap of Assassin's Creed fans and Snow White fans. I'm sure in the Venn diagram, there's probably some middle section where they overlap, but overall I feel like they're in two pretty separate camps, and both camps have just stood up and said, no, we don't want it. Take a hike. Now, from all accounts that I've heard, even ones trying to be overtly fair, Snow White is just hot garbage. Even if it didn't have one of the most alienating leads in movie history, and even if it didn't seem like it was the Disneyfication of a classic fairy tale, rewriting history, all that crap no one's interested in. It just sounds like a dumpster fire of a movie anyway, which is interesting because there were a few movies that came out that were sort of polarizing, but people actually went and saw them and like, oh, that was actually good. People said they really liked Wicked for what it was, but that does not sound to be the case with Snow White. By all accounts, it just sounds to be trash. What I find interesting about the Assassin's Creed situation is that I watched a bunch of gameplay of it. It's not the worst game. It's certainly not like a Snow White level disaster. It's just pretty mid with like a gay black guy as the lead in feudal Japan. And I think if we lived in a different time, in a different era, and we hadn't had a funnel forced down our throats to just gobble gallons and gallons of slop, the reaction might be different. But what I've been noticing and what I feel like is happening is whether or not this game is terrible, everybody has just decided, no, this is the line. It's a lot like the Bud Light thing. Was anyone really all that upset that Dylan Mulvaney did some sort of sponsorship on the side or whatever? I mean, if it didn't go viral on social media, I probably wouldn't even have known about it. But I just think it was like, that's it. That's the last bridge you're going to cross. And they just stood up and push back, and it completely changed it, so much so that Shane Gillis is now the face of Bud Light, the formerly canceled comedian who made Asian jokes. That's how much of a 180 Bud Light took. And I'm looking at this Assassin's Creed situation, and what I'm seeing is like, it's not that bad, it's not even that woke, it's just, no, we're done. That's it, that's the line, that's the last one you get to push on us. And I love to see it. I think there's been a lot of people that consume pop culture who have been overly patient, probably more patient than these producers deserve, like holding their breath and waiting to see what the next season of Mandalorian is going to look like, or will this next game sequel be bad? It's like they hear the chatter, they understand the culture war, I think they don't really want a part in it, but the problem is the people who've manufactured this culture war just won't let you stay neutral. You can pick their gay communist side, or you can pick just being a normal person side, but they're going to make you pick a side because they simply won't stop. And of course, the expression has always been get woke, go broke. And I think that's a bit of a cope at times. And a creator I really like, Razorfist, has always argued that it's go broke, get woke as an effort to save your property. The merits of these things can be debated, but what can't be debated, I believe, there just doesn't appear to be any more market return on your aggressive, leftist, modern-day politics shoved into literally every single thing we consume. It just kind of feels like it's the end of the line. Now, I'm recording this on Saturday, so the official numbers have not come in for Snow White, but it don't look good. All over social media, I'm just seeing picture after picture of just empty theaters, people going to see this movie and like 2 other people being in the movie with them. Current projections for the weekend are topping out at about $55 million, and with a reported budget of about $270 million, it's going to take a little while to get their budget back. And you can compare that with the Little Mermaid live-action freakish remake, whatever they do with these things, and that was a pretty controversial movie at the time too, and that was about $95 million, which, honestly isn't all that bad, and this is going to be about half that. I mean, clearly the culture's changing. There's a completely different, obviously, regime in charge, but also just a different way of communication in the nation. Like, the left, especially the more radical left, is sort of being marginalized, pushed to the side where they belong, but generally just kind of being like laughed at, mocked at, looked at as a little bit ridiculous. When you have 2 incredibly powerful studios making 2 very recognizable brand name properties and them being outright rejected by the public, it's pretty hard to deny that there's a giant cultural shift going on right now. I think a lot of people, especially more casual consumers of video games and pop culture and such, really, they just want to get along. They don't really want there to be a frontline battle when they go to the movies or when they pick up a video game controller. They just want to have fun when it's time to have fun. But I think the tide is just too high. When people like my mom, who's a lifelong Democrat and voted for Kamala in this last election, are just fed up by all the gay shit, things gotta change. It's like you'll hear it from normies that kind of, they're just over it. The type of people who would never say anything publicly about it, might not even think it, but after you just stack it up after property, year in and year out, and now there's finally an alternative to this sort of grander utopian leftist narrative, it just feels like people have the courage to be like, no, I actually don't like that. Yeah, I don't want to play as a gay black guy in feudal Japan, and I don't want to have a Snow White who doesn't get Prince Charming and is a mean little brat every time you hear from her. And I'll be completely transparent, I'm not the target audience for either one of these products, even if they were done well. I played the first Assassin's Creed video game and I was like, meh. It's not really for me, and that's okay. There's lots and lots of games out there, and it might be one game that I discover years from now. Who knows? But I was never going to play this game anyway, so I'm not here to gloat. I'm not here to, dunk on Ubisoft. There's plenty of people who are going to do that for me. I'm just culturally reporting, and I find it absolutely fascinating. And I never had any intention on viewing Snow White. I don't have kids, and it's just not something that would generally appeal to me. So in addition to that, I was never going to go and watch it and review it. But I just find this divide and this definitive, deafening no that is just ringing out across the country right now. I think it's absolutely beautiful. That's all I've got for you today. Go watch my podcast. Watch the MFR podcast every Monday night at 8. I hope to see you there live in the chat. Peace out.